Hey babes, happy Thursday. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Jessica Ash, for those of you that don't know, and I'm a functional nutritionist and just a hormone nerd in general. I love connecting biological truths and education about your metabolism in a way that's easy to understand and implement into your life, because that's really what it's all about. If you like what I talk about in my videos, remember that my online course, Fully Nourished, is really a signature blueprint in teaching you how to restore your hormones and your metabolism using nutrition, and the information about the course is always in the link in my bio. But with that being said, let's get started. So here it is, the long-awaited video that you guys maybe don't want to hear about, but do you need to gain weight to lose weight? And this is actually inspired by something that I already talked about on Instagram. I had done a story on this a while back. It's under my story highlights labeled weight loss. And you guys just ate it up. You guys were like, can you please expand on this and save this? I want to come back and reference this. And so I thought I would compile everything that I kind of said that really resonated with you guys and put it in today's YouTube video. So this one's gonna be, I hope it's not too long, but I just wanna make sure I get all the information in that you guys wanna hear. I hope it really helps you kind of break through that mindset of why it can be important to gain weight to lose weight and if it's necessary or not. Now, you'll probably hear me and then many other people in the pro-metabolic community talking about safety weight, or we call it the healing pounds sometimes. And this is not something that I kind of set out to create, but after working with thousands of women and obviously working on myself, I really noticed that there was kind of this phenomenon happening for a lot of women. Now, I say a lot of women because not every woman goes through the same process when she starts nourishing her body and healing her metabolism. But a lot of women were gaining some weight. And at first, it was kind of a mindset thing because we are taught in this culture to really equate weight loss with health. And so when you're gaining weight for health, it can kind of almost seem like this constant fear thing. Like, oh no, I'm gaining weight. And then like, but I'm feeling so good. And then like, oh no, I'm gaining weight. And so I really started seeing that it was a pattern. And so I had to set out to really figure out what was going on. Why were women gaining weight, yet starting to feel so good and see such progress with their hormones? And what I came to the conclusion was that a lot of women had to gain weight to create safety in their bodies. And we'll talk a lot more about it throughout this video. But then a lot of women now, as eating for your metabolism is becoming more and more popular, are really starting to fear gaining weight, and they continue to be concerned about gaining weight and concerned about the safety weight or the healing pounds and have a lot of questions regarding that. So I hope this video really breaks it down for you and so you understand it a little bit more. And I do want to emphasize that how we make changes does matter. Not all changes have to be made overnight, and many women are just jumping in with both feet, like I've talked about in the previous two videos, and not really seeing the results that they'd like. And so we're gonna kind of like do a little and rewind and talk a little bit more about why this is happening, what we can do about it, if it's necessary for us, and if it's not. And I'll go over the main questions that I get and also some of the main concerns. And then I also want to show you my story and my journey and how my progression as I went from being on a super restrictive diet to now supporting my metabolism, like how that has progressed for you. And I'll visually show you with pictures at the end of the video. So the first main question that I always get is, do I have to gain weight? Do I have to gain safety weight, especially if I'm already overweight? Now, a lot of women who are already overweight or significantly overweight are very hyper concerned about gaining weight. And if you haven't already checked out my first two videos in this series, those are really for you, especially the second one, the previous video. But regardless of if you have weight to lose or not, if you've taken Fully Nourished, which I think is important because I've actually made all the mistakes, and so that's why I gave everyone a blueprint and how to implement the changes appropriately, you'll know that in Fully Nourished, and oftentimes on social media and throughout all my information, I actually encourage people to make changes very slowly. I think it's very important to implement pro-metabolic changes slowly to allow the body to adjust. But do people really listen? Not all the time. And so this is why oftentimes a lot of women will gain more weight than they have to, or they're unhappy with how their body has responded to the changes. And we have to remember that when we make these changes really quickly, the body is already primed to put fuel into storage. So, a lot of us are coming in especially if we already have weight to lose, our metabolisms are pretty much already trashed. And so when your metabolism is in a state of being like super efficient or trying to cut corners, it doesn't really like to burn a lot of fuel, and so it will actually put fat into storage. And so when you add more calories or more energy into a body that's already not using energy well, that's going to result in putting more fat into storage. And then oftentimes people are coming from a very different diet, and so they're switching the types of foods they're eating dramatically, and often unintentionally eating way more calories right away. And so I just want to emphasize that if this is you, you didn't make a mistake. It's not bad. A lot of women actually do have to make changes pretty quickly in order to see the results that they want quickly. But sometimes, weight gain is a result of feeling better, and it just is how it is. But in Fully Nourished, and as a rule, I always recommend that people change the quality of the foods that they're eating and the types of foods that they're eating, and kind of spread out the food that they're eating over the course of the day in frequent increments before they actually increase the amount of calories that they're eating. Because changing the quality and the types of food you're eating and actually increasing your food frequency oftentimes will speed up your metabolism in and of itself, and then you can slowly increase calories over time to allow your body to adjust. But I will say that there are a lot of women, no matter what, regardless of how they implement these changes, that need to gain about 10 to 30 pounds of safety weight or healing pounds for their body to feel safe. Because a lot of women have yo-yo dieted or restricted calories or restricted foods for a very, very long time, and so their body is constantly and continuously registering that it's in a famine. And so no matter what, is when you start to implement more calories or more foods or better quality foods or more nutrient dense foods in a body that feels like it's in a famine, no matter what, it's going to want to put some into storage for later because it doesn't know when the next famine is coming. And this is only natural and it's only normal. And sometimes if we're in such an imbalanced place, we need to actually just take a step back, give the body what it needs, and then give it the space to do what it needs to do to feel safe again. And there's so many women who are with you in this. If this is you and you're like, I really did have to gain some weight, and unfortunately I'm a little bit more overweight than I would like to be, but I'm feeling so much better, just know you're not alone. And every single day it's a practice to really become content with where you're at and happy with how far your health has become or has come, and also know that you're going to look different in the future. It's okay to want to look different in the future, but how we get there is everything. However, if you're someone that's super concerned with weight gain, that weight gain brings you lots and lots of stress, I highly recommend working on your mindset on that. But also you need to go much, much slower. You need to implement changes very slowly and very strategically. And the biggest thing is when you're transferring the types of foods you're eating, you need to make sure you're not unintentionally bumping your calories up super, super fast. But don't complain if you're taking a lot more time to see the results that you want in the health and hormone department. Because sometimes, if you're not making changes as quickly, you're not going to maybe see results as quickly, and that's just natural and normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a race. There's no finish line, no winner, but it's important to remember that, every choice is a path, and if we choose one path, then it's gonna look a lot different than somebody else's path. So we can't say I want the results of the person that gained the 30 pounds of safety weight and is seeing such great results. Well, you've chosen a different path, and so make sure you remember that, and vice versa. Don't look at the person that's implementing changes slowly and didn't gain any weight, but they're not seeing their hormones change as fast. Remember, grass is greener happens no matter what category you're in, and remember, the grass isn't always greener. What you did, and what you chose, and now going forward, what are you going to do about it? So that's the first thing, is do you have to gain safety weight? It really depends. Not everyone does, and some people do, and a lot of bodies do need to, but not everyone does. So it's really dependent upon where you're coming from and where you're trying to go. Now, the second question I get a lot, and I think it's important to address, is what is the difference between safety weight or the healing pounds and actually just gaining weight? Because there is two different scenarios. And yeah, both, when it comes down to it, is gaining fat and gaining weight. But like I've talked about before in other videos, is sometimes when we go pro-metabolic, we have to remember that there are other places that those nutrients and energy can go, like our liver, like our organs, like our bones. So we can't always determine how much weight we've gained just by the number on the scale, but a lot of us do have to gain some body fat when we're healing our metabolisms. That is is often something that women are going to have to do. But it is good to be able to decipher between if we're just like continually gaining weight and our body's not doing well, or if we've gained weight for a purpose and then it's going to stop and plateau. And this will really like draw the differences between fully nourished, or like the philosophy that I set forth, and actually all in. Or if you're familiar with kind of like what's really popular right now is a lot of women are going all in. They have restricted for a long period of time and now they're just eating all the foods, all the calories. And this point right here that I'm making is gonna really show you the difference between eating fully nourished and eating all in. So the point of restoring your metabolism is not actually gaining weight. I think a lot of people, because they're so hyper focused on weight, they focus in on the weight, but the purpose of restoring your metabolism and implementing metabolism restoring principles is not for the purpose of gaining weight. And I know a lot of women are talking about it because it's often an outcome of healing, especially if you're maintaining a weight below what your body naturally is comfortable at or naturally has healthy balanced hormones at. But the purpose of eating metabolic is not actually to gain weight. Whereas a lot of people who are doing all in are focusing only on the weight gain. And, you know, that's all fine and dandy, but I talk about this a lot throughout all of my content, is the habits behind your weight, regardless of if you're overweight or underweight or an average weight, the habits that are behind what your body looks like are all that matters. So there can be somebody who might appear to be very overweight to you, but they practice healthier habits than someone who maybe would look fit or healthy to you. And so the habits behind the body are everything. The weight is not the point, because you can get to a unhealthy weight in an unhealthy way, or you can get to a health, quote unquote, what would be socially acceptable as a healthy weight in an unhealthy way. So it's really important to remember that the habits behind the weight is everything. It's not the actual weight itself. And oftentimes when we are working to heal our metabolisms are already struggling. So as we implement more food, as we implement more food frequency, better, more nutrient dense foods, this can take a lot of stress off the body, both physically and mentally, but it's very different than just eating everything and anything you want in sight. And that really is important to remember, is being nourished is not about just eating. There's actually strategy behind how I teach you how to nourish your body, with the frequency and the balance of macronutrients and the types of foods you're eating with that frequency. All of those things matter, because all of those things are going to help you achieve better hormone balance. If I just told you, just eat and eat more and eat whatever you want, you would gain a lot of weight for sure, but you might not actually achieve the hormone balance that you want either, because the types of foods you eat is information to the body. And I do see value in sometimes just letting yourself eat whatever you want. I think mostly there's like a mental health aspect to it. But I see a lot of women making the mistake of just like eating whatever to gain weight so that they get their period back, or so they balance their hormones. And they're like 10 or 15 pounds heavier and they still haven't balanced their hormones at all. They still haven't gotten their period back. And I believe that this is why, is that the body needs certain nutrition and nutrients and certain habits to translate safety to it. And safety usually equals reproduction or fertility. And just eating whatever, whenever, doesn't actually translate that to the body. Of course, it can make the body feel a lot safer than restriction and yo-yo dieting and under eating, but it doesn't always result in the outcome that you want because there's no strategy behind it. And so remember, fully nourished is not actually about gaining weight. That's not the point. Oftentimes gaining some safety weight happens, but that is not the point. Restoration of the metabolism and translating safety to the body is the point of fully nourished. And so how do we know that something is safety weight versus you're just continually gaining weight without stopping? Well, safety weight usually happens in a period, like a short period of like 3 to 6 months, and often caps out at around 10 to 30 pounds. I rarely see women who gain more than that. I mean, some women do need to, but for the most part, it's usually between that 10 to 30 pound mark. And then it will plateau, and then you will maintain easily. And the biggest key to this is you're also going to see your symptoms start improving. So the symptoms that you set out to balance, or the balance you're trying to achieve, is happening. So your cycle's balancing out, or your ovulation is returned, or your period is returned. You're feeling a lot more energized, better moods, you're seeing better hair growth, you're seeing better skin. You're slowly making progress in the right direction. And remember, healing is always one step forward, two steps back. It's never linear. There's always ups and downs. But at the end of the day, you should be moving in the right direction, moving towards this place of stability and balance where you no longer have to work really hard to achieve the health that you desire. When it comes to actually just gaining weight, and it's not really safety weight, it's just continual weight gain, it's when your symptoms aren't really improving. You just continually gain weight over a period of time. You never stop. It never plateaus. But the biggest thing is that oftentimes when you're just gaining weight and you're not actually nourishing properly, you're gonna not feel that much better. Like, you're gonna be storing a lot of fuel, but you're not actually gonna be working towards using energy better, which is the whole point of restoring your metabolism. When you go into restoring your metabolism, you're not using energy well, but you're doing a lot of different habits and laying a lot of different foundations that are hopefully allowing you to use energy better and better day after day. Whereas if you're just, gaining weight to gain weight, you're not actually going to see an improvement in anything. You're just going to kind of feel like you're moving in the wrong direction. So that's really the difference. And this is not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes it's hard to see the difference because we'll get in our heads and we'll be like, well, I'm not really improving. And then some days you're like, oh, I actually feel great. And then you're like, I'm not really improving. And so sometimes we'll convince ourselves like, maybe it's not safety weight and it's actually, I'm just gaining weight. But remember that there's usually a clear difference. Is like, you can sit down and get real with yourself and say like, I am feeling better, even though my pants fit a little tighter. Like, I am feeling better. I'm seeing a lot of improvements over time. Like, I just gotta stick with it. So, it's not a hard and fast rule, but a lot of times there is a clear difference between the safety weight and just gaining weight with no end in sight. Now, the third question I want to address is, will I ever lose the weight? Because of course, this is going to be the natural progression. I gain safety weight. Do I need to gain safety weight? What's the difference between safety weight and just rapidly gaining weight? And then, can I ever lose the weight? And of course we can lose the weight. I think there's no doubt about it, and I want to say that because I think it's important for you to hear. If your internal dialogue is always like, I can never lose this weight, I will never lose this weight, you might never lose the weight. But if your internal dialogue, which I'm gonna try to confirm today, is yes, I can lose the weight and I will lose the weight when my body is ready, that's going to make all the difference in the world. Now, weight gain, why does fat gain happen, or why do we store fat? Well, a lot of times it's because we're taking in more energy than we're using. Usually these units of energy are calories, but we have to remember that we don't just use calories when we exercise. We use them for everything. We use them to repair our tissues, to think, to sleep, to grow hair, to breathe, to get oxygen into our bodies, to pump blood through our veins, for our heart to beat, for our digestion. Energy is kind of like the currency of our body. And our body is doing 1,000 things a day that uses energy. So if we're taking in more than we're using, or our hormones are telling ourselves, are kind of primed in a position to tell ourselves to not burn energy and to store energy, we're going to put more fuel into storage than we want to be putting into storage, aka we'll gain weight. And keep in mind that enzymes and hormones are really going to dictate our use of energy, and hormones and enzymes are often dictated by nutrients and minerals and our environment as well. But many other things can affect our use of energy and the way that our hormones and enzymes are communicating to ourselves. So our macronutrient balance, the amount of sleep we're getting, the amount of sunlight we're getting, our gut health, our stress levels, the season, the vitamins and minerals that we're intaking on a regular basis, all that is going to translate to the body. It's either safe or not safe, and therefore can use energy or store energy. So we have to remember, and I try to emphasize this throughout our whole series here, that body fat has a purpose and isn't actually bad. It can have a really positive effect on hormones and fertility for a lot of women, especially if they've gone in for long periods of restriction or yo-yo dieting. But of course there is a point where body fat might work against us and we want to lose fat, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're in the mentality of like, I want weight loss and I want it right now, you might not be happy that weight loss and hormonal balance are not always synonymous. And sometimes we can't achieve one without sacrificing the other for a little bit. So pursuing hormone balance so that we can pursue fat loss is the better way to go than trying to pursue fat loss and then achieve hormone balance later. And I know, you're like, I don't want to gain weight to lose weight. That sounds miserable. But I want to remind you that if you lose weight the right way, you'll be able to keep it off and it won't be an eternal fight down the line. Whereas a lot of people who chase weight loss and fat loss at the expense of all else, at the expense of their hormones, are often in a constant battle of fat loss. They never really achieve it, and once they do, they have a hard time maintaining it, and it never stays off because all of their attempts to forsake their hormones in exchange for weight loss has left them with a slower and slower metabolism that's no longer functioning optimally at all. So yes, calories in and calories out does determine our fat loss, I'm not gonna lie, but there are many factors that are going to affect this equation. Calories in, calories out is subjective based on all the things that I just mentioned. And there are a lot of ways to actually get the body to use energy better, which is what nourishing and healing your metabolism is all about. But it's a process, and if you want to manipulate the way that your body uses energy, you have to do the work and take the time. And we'll talk about this more actually in the next video, which is going to be all about creating a deficit. But I want to remind you that fat loss is stressful to the body. And if you want your body to be as resilient as possible through the stress of opening up the fat cells and dealing with what's inside of them, you want to lay a strong metabolic foundation first in order to be able to deal with that stress and come out on the other side with a metabolism that hasn't taken too hard of a hit that can be easily built back up. And a lot of us just have to get real with ourselves and remember that most of us come into this metabolism healing journey if we're a little bit overweight or we have fat to lose. We've already done a lot of restriction and a lot of yo-yo dieting, and we're still stuck in this place. And so a lot of us have to say, you know what, I've been trying to do this the wrong way for a really long time, and it's time for me to actually do this the right way and build a really strong metabolic foundation before I attempt fat loss. And this is why I'm doing this series, is I think it's very important to understand that there's nothing wrong with losing fat, but this idea that fat loss is going to equal hormonal balance or fat loss is going to equal health just needs to be thrown out the window or thrown in the trash can, because they aren't always the same thing and they're not always synonymous. And how you achieve fat loss is really everything. There are many ways to achieve it, and if we're not achieving it the correct way, it's usually at the expense of ourselves and our future. And then, 2 years from now or 3 years from now, we're stuck in this place where we're like, why is this happening to me? Why is it so hard to lose weight? Why can't I ever lose weight? Why do I look at food and gain weight? And it's because we've done all this metabolic destruction for so long. So it's okay to want to lose fat, and we'll talk a lot more about the actual how to do that in the next video. We'll talk about creating a deficit and all of that. But I want to remind you that nourishment first is very important before aesthetics. And I know aesthetics are important to a lot of us, and I know aesthetics matter. I'm not actually in the camp of like, it doesn't matter what we look like, because it does affect our mental health, and it's important for us to like the way that we look. But this needs to be realistic and in line with our goals. A lot of us want great health and great hormonal balance, but we want a body that doesn't promote great health and hormonal balance. So we need to actually allow both of those things to meet, and a lot of times we'll meet somewhere in the middle where we actually didn't realize how much body fat we needed to be healthy. And so I think it's important to find that kind of balance, and that's what the journey is for. You swing to one side and you swing to another side, and you start swinging back and forth until you really find a cadence and you find a rhythm that works really well for you. And before you start to attempt fat loss, or if you're attempting fat loss and your body's saying no, then at that point it's sometimes a good thing to say, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. My body's not ready yet, and we'll move on. We'll try again very, very soon. I'll give it a few more weeks or a few more months, and then I'll try again. And oftentimes, if we don't fight our body and we work with our body, we can achieve our goals and get results a lot easier than if we were fighting our body every step of the way. So now that we kind of have talked about that, I'm going to just hop in and show you a visual of my own journey, because a lot of you guys know my story and some of you guys don't. And so I think that this is a great way to kind of have you visually see what it can look like and how deceiving bodies can be. I try to talk about it a lot, you know, that just because someone's fit or just because someone's skinny or just because someone appears to be healthy doesn't mean that they are. And I often remind people that health and wellness professionals are often chasing the next fad and the next diet because their restrictive diets are actually leaving them more hormonally damaged than before. And I am a great representation of that. And I learned my lesson the hard way, which is why I teach you guys the way that I do. I don't want you to have to go through what I went through, because it was really a lot of me wasting time. I look at it as, of course, it was a learning experience, but it was also just like such a waste of time where I could have just been nourishing my body all along and got so much more results so much faster. And I have definitely had to gain weight to then attempt to lose weight again. I am now in a place where I am attempting and working on fat loss. You guys might have seen it over the course of the past 12 or 16 weeks. I've actually been working on it for 16 weeks now, and I haven't lost 1 pound on the scale, but it's all about the measurements and how I'm feeling about myself, and I am leaner. But I want to just remind you guys, and I'll probably show you once I'm kind of to a place where I'm more towards my goal. But I have been doing this very, very slowly and very, very properly in a very small deficit, the least amount of deficit that I have to, because I want to cause the least amount of stress on my body. But I was not ready to attempt fat loss for almost 3 years, and I had to work on my metabolism for 3 years before I could start attempting to lose fat pretty recently. I've only been working on it for the last couple of months. And before I show you the pictures, I just wanted to say, like, ignore the random pictures. I don't take a lot of pictures of my body, so I had to kind of pull from the pictures that I do have of my body, and they're kind of random, but I do want to give you guys a visual of like my journey and my story. So the first picture up on the screen is when I first got diagnosed. This was actually when I was at my most miserable. I had just gotten diagnosed with like hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's. They were like playing around with other autoimmune diagnoses, and I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. I was also pre-diabetic in this picture. I was not sleeping well at all. I had horrible hair loss, really painful periods. I was not ovulating. I had acne all over my face, my back, my neck, and I had really, really bad digestion. This is probably when I was at my most miserable before I had made any changes. And I am very petite, so I am just pushing 5'4", and usually like a very healthy place for me with a lot of muscle is probably 130. But before I started gaining muscle, which was right here, I was probably 40 pounds overweight at this point and very inflamed, just felt awful. So at this point I knew I needed to change my diet, and I wasn't really sure what to do, but at the time, this is right around when paleo started becoming very much the thing. And I wish I had a picture for you when I first changed my diet, because I changed my diet and I wasn't super restrictive at that time. I just was eating more whole real foods, and I didn't have a lot of money to spend on like nuts and seeds and things. So I was naturally eating like a lot of meats, eggs, and I didn't cut dairy at first. So I was eating lots of like high quality dairy, and I actually looked my best here. And now that I look back, I am so annoyed at myself because I still thought I was super overweight and I wasn't happy with my body. And so that, of course, caused me to become more and more restrictive. I probably felt my best and looked my best and was my healthiest around that time, because I was still eating adequate carbohydrates. I was never restricting. I was eating plenty of calories, and I was strength training. And I just overall was like focused on healing more than I was focused on restriction. But because I still thought I was fat and I still had some like lingering issues that I just wanted to be resolved right then and there, I didn't realize that I needed to just spend more time. I got more restrictive, and this was obviously off the influence of a lot of people who were saying go dairy free and replace all your milk products with like nuts and seed products. People were saying like eat way more vegetables, don't eat as much carbs. And so this is when I started going more and more low carb and got more and more restrictive. And I really was convinced that carbs were the devil. And of course, like within the first couple of months, I lost weight. My digestion improved a little bit, but I was really bloated and got really constipated. I also was losing a ton of hair at the time. I was super irritable and had really bad brain fog. So I had a lot of energy, but now I can look back and say, man, that was like adrenal energy. That was not good, stable energy. It was very up and down and high and low. And I thought, well, if I'm not getting better, I guess I need to go stricter. And of course, this is all from outside influence as well. So many people are saying like, the new thing, you've got to just ditch carbs altogether. You've got to go keto. And I was like, I had a very carnivore-based mentality. I was doing the least amount of carbs as possible. And I really was just so restrictive. I was so afraid of food. I was eating kind of like 10 or 15 foods max. I wasn't really eating a lot of foods at the time, allowing myself, and I could not understand why I was still struggling with like pre-diabetic blood sugar numbers, why I was still super estrogen dominant and was super constipated. Like I had to eat so much raw greens and so many chia seeds to just poop. And I was just like, what is wrong? Like everyone's promoting this as the healthiest possible diet. And here I looked good, right? Everyone would say like, wow, Jessica, you look awesome. Like you are like, oh my gosh, you've lost so much weight. You look great. And here I was probably at my most miserable. I could probably compare it to when I first got diagnosed with all my issues and had all these issues. And I'm like, really, like, yes, a lot of my symptoms have changed or transformed, but not really to a better place. Like I'm struggling just as much, just in different ways. And this is right around the time when I started to discover Dr. Pete's work, Dr. Ray Peat, and some other like metabolic greats, and just started kind of diving in because I was at the time already searching for some answers. I was working with clients and I noticed that they were being put on low carb diets and I was helping them with their low carb diets, and I was also on a low carb diet. And a lot of other people that were in the low carb and paleo community were on low carb diets, and they were all having really bad hormone issues. Like hormone issues were not getting better. If anything, they were getting worse. The only thing that people really were doing is losing weight. And I started to realize like, I don't think that weight loss and hormone balance are synonymous. I was like, maybe they're not the same thing. And maybe one without the other is actually meaningless, if not dangerous. And as I kept studying the work of Dr. Pete and started studying the metabolism more and more, I actually started realizing how messed up my hormones were. I don't think I even realized it until I started to really understand the balance between stress hormones and thyroid hormones. And I kind of was still really hesitant to introduce carbohydrates and dairy because I had been so convinced that they were so bad for me. And I was implementing things very, very slowly, but I got to a point where I realized like, man, I'm so jacked up. I just went all in. And around that time, I actually got injured, which I totally think was just a God thing because it stopped me from my over exercise. I was doing like high intensity interval training and lifting weights for like sometimes up to 2 hours a day. So I was doing really restrictive diets and also over exercising, and I think my body just crashed. And then I want to show you the picture of me 6 months into my metabolic journey. So this is 6 months into my metabolic journey, and man, I was not feeling good. You know, some people have a really rough transition between their restrictive diets and working on their metabolism, and I am definitely one of them. I had wrecked my digestion and also my ability to tolerate carbohydrates. It was so touch and go for a while. I could only tolerate like cooked fruits, really well cooked meat in broths, like pureed foods, like steamed and boiled, like root vegetables. Like I was not digesting food well at all. And I totally had done it to myself. My blood sugar control was really bad, and I really had just done a number on my body, and it really took me like 6 to 12 months to even feel semi-okay. And it's really interesting because I don't think I realized how bad I felt until I re-implemented and reintroduced all the foods that my body needed to thrive. And that's when I started to feel my worst. But I kept going, and I finally was able to get to a point where everything kind of normalized, my digestion normalized. I started to actually see like my metabolic markers were finally improving. And just around that time, I entered a really stressful time in life. That was right when my business was starting to pick up because I was sharing about all this stuff and people wanted to know more. And then at the same time, there were a lot of life things happen. We had a death in the family, we had a fire, there was all this stuff that happened. And my body went through the ringer for another 1.5 years of stress. No matter how much I nourished, no matter how much I focused on balance, I was really, really struggling. And so I went through that year of trying to get to this place of normal, and like right when I achieved normal, I just went through another 1.5 years of stress. And then for about 6 months, I finally had this time where I was just recovering from that. And then this is a picture of me in Hawaii that year. And so I decided to take a vacation, but I was 20 pounds heavier than I was from the previous picture. So between, I think it was like 2 to 3 years, I gained a good amount of fat, and I couldn't get it off. It didn't matter how much I exercised, anything I did, my body needed that safety. And so I allowed my body to be safe. And yeah, of course I wanted to lose the fat, lose the weight, but it was not an appropriate time. And so that trip to Hawaii was last year, and I still had to focus on nourishing for balance for a whole nother year until 2021, when I could actually start focusing on fat loss. So right now, I'm probably before I started my fat loss journey that I'm in right now, I was probably 10 pounds heavier than the picture in Hawaii. I probably gained another 10 pounds because I had to really build up my ability to tolerate calories. I tried to get my calorie intake up as high as I possibly could, really focused on sleep, really focused on being very frequent with my food, and that just resulted in my body needing to gain another like 5 to 10 pounds. And that's okay, because I knew I was building a very strong foundation so I could start working on my fat loss. And I will share my fat loss journey with you guys at some point. Maybe I'll do a video, or I'll share about it on Instagram and just kind of my progress and my results. But the progress and results have been slow. I'm not looking for a 90-day transformation. I'm actually looking to lose fat the right way moving forward, so I don't really have to lose too much fat again. It's a very difficult process. It's stressful on the body. It's hard on your metabolism. It's overall just not fun. Like, it's a grind. And so I'll definitely share that with you guys. I just want to be able to show you guys the progress and what that looks like over time. But I just want to remind you that there is a time and a place to lose fat. And I've been there where, yeah, I want to lose fat too, but it's not the time and the place, and my body trumps everything else, and I need to honor and respect my body above all. And don't compare the pictures that I showed today to your body. You know, my body's gonna look different than yours. My journey is gonna look different than yours. And I want you to remember that the female body is not a statue. I'm not gonna stress myself out trying to go back, because I'll never get my body back. I can only move forward. I can only move forward in time. And so right now I'm focusing on building and growing and transforming my body, because I'm a completely different person than the girl I was even 2 years ago, and so is my body. And most of us are coming into this journey burnt out, undernourished, and just in a place where we really do need to build a strong foundation first. And so I want to remind you that a lot of us are in the same boat. We're really in this together. We're focusing on our journeys and our metabolisms together. Some of us are coming from different backgrounds, and so maybe some of us can actually, attempt fat loss a little bit sooner than others. But at the end of the day, like, we need to have each other's back, and when somebody is feeling down, encourage them. When somebody is feeling up, like, let them inspire you. And it's really important to remember that it is a process like anything else, and you can achieve it. It's just going to take time. It's going to take implementing the right steps, some strategy, and consistency. But, please build a strong foundation first. And that's really why I have Fully Nourished available. There are many other women in this community that have equally as amazing programs or equally as amazing information. But I just, I wanted something to be like the foundational blueprint, so you had everything that you needed to know to get started and build that strong foundation so that you could springboard from there. But at the end of the day, it really is about the journey and how we achieve the goals we want to achieve, because really what you want to achieve is the sky's the limit. It's all about how you get there, and that will really determine how you're able to enjoy it in the end. So I'll see you in the next video, where we're actually going to talk all about creating a deficit and actually attempting fat loss and steps we can take to do that and different strategies. So I'll see you there.